Pentagon to bolster their position, but had no luck. The Chief of Staff just couldn't be convinced. The estimate died a quick death. Some months later it was completely declassified and relegated to the incinerator. A few copies, one of which I saw, were kept as mementos of the golden days of the UFOs. The top Air Force Command's refusal to buy the interplanetary theory didn't have any immediate effect upon the morale of Project Sign because the reports were getting better. A belated report that is more of a collector's item than a good UFO sighting came into ATIC in the fall of 1948. It was from Moscow. Someone, I could never find out exactly who, reported a huge smudge-like object in the sky. Then radar came into the picture. For months, the anti-saucer factions had been pointing their fingers at the lack of radar reports, saying, "If they exist, why don't they show up on radar scopes?" When they showed up on radar scopes, the UFO won some converts. On October 15th, an F-61, a World War II Black Widow night fighter, was on patrol over Japan when it picked up an unidentified target on its radar. The target was flying between 5,000 and 6,000 feet and traveling about 200 miles per hour. When the F-61 tried to intercept, it would get to within 12,000 feet of the UFO only to have it accelerate to an estimated 1,200 miles per hour, leaving the F-61 far behind before slowing down again. The F-61 crew made 6 attempts to close on the UFO. On one pass, the crew said they did get close enough to see its silhouette. It was 20 to 30 feet long and looked like a rifle bullet. Toward the end of November, a wire came into Project Sign from Germany. It was the first report where a UFO was seen and simultaneously picked up on radar. This type of report, the first of many to come, is one of the better types of UFO reports. The wire said, "At 2200 hours, local time, 23 November 1948, Captain X saw an base. It was at an unknown altitude. It looked like a reddish star and was moving in a southerly direction across Munich, turning slightly to the southwest, then the southeast. The speed could have been between 200 to 600 miles per hour. The actual speed could not be estimated, not knowing the height. Captain X called base operations, and they called the radar station. Radar reported that they had seen nothing on their scope, but would check again. Radar then called operations to report that they did have a target at 27,000 feet, some 30 miles south of Munich, traveling at 900 miles per hour. Captain X reported that the object that he saw was now in that area. A few minutes later, radar called again to say that the target had climbed to 50,000 feet and was circling 40 miles south of Munich. Captain X is an experienced pilot now flying F-80s and is considered to be completely reliable. The sighting was verified by Captain Y, also an F-80 pilot. The possibility that this was a balloon was checked, but the answer from Air Weather Service was not a balloon. No aircraft were in the area. Nothing we know of, except possibly experimental aircraft, which are not in Germany, can climb 23,000 feet in a matter of minutes and travel 900 miles per hour. By the end of 1948, Project Sign had received several hundred UFO reports. Of these, 167 had been saved as good reports. About 36 were unknown. Even though the UFO reports were getting better and more numerous, the enthusiasm over the interplanetary idea was cooling off. The same people who had fought to go to Godman Air Force Base to talk to Colonel Hicks and his UFO observers in January now had to be prodded when a sighting needed investigating. More and more work was being pushed off onto the other investigative organization that was helping ATIC. The kickback on the top secret estimate of the situation was beginning to dampen a lot of enthusiasms. It was definitely a bear market for UFOs. A bull market was on the way, however. Early 1949 was to bring little lights and green fireballs. The little lights were UFOs, but the green fireballs were real. End of Chapter 3. Recording by Roger Moline. Chapter 4 of The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by Edward Ruppold. Chapter 4. Green Fireballs, Project Twinkle, Little Lights, and Grudge. At exactly midnight on September 18, 1954, my telephone rang. It was Jim Phelan, a friend of mine from the Long Beach Press-Telegram, and he had a good flying saucer report, hot off the wires. He read it to me. The lead line was, "Thousands of people saw a huge fireball light up dark New Mexico skies tonight." The story went on to tell about how a blinding green fireball the size of a full moon had silently streaked southeast across Colorado and northern New Mexico at 8:40 that night. Thousands of people had seen the fireball. It had passed right over a crowded football stadium at Santa Fe, New Mexico, and people in Denver said it turned night into day. The crew of a TWA airliner flying into Albuquerque from Amarillo, Texas saw it. Every police and newspaper switchboard in the two-state area was jammed with calls. One of the calls was from a man inquiring if anything unusual had happened recently. When he was informed about the mysterious fireball, he heaved an audible sigh of relief. "Thanks," he said. "I was afraid I'd gotten some bad bourbon," and he hung up. Dr. Lincoln La Paz, world-famous authority on meteorites and head of the University of New Mexico's Institute of Meteoritics, apparently took the occurrence calmly. The Wire story said he had told a reporter that he would plot its course, try to determine where it landed, and go out and try to find it. "But," he said, "I don't expect to find anything." When Jim Phelan had read the rest of the report, he asked, "What was it?" "It sounds to me like the green fireballs are back," I answered. "What the devil are green fireballs?" "What the devil are green fireballs? I'd like to know. So would a lot of other people." The green fireball streaked into UFO history late in November 1948, when people around Albuquerque, New Mexico began to report seeing mysterious green flares at night. The first reports mentioned only a green streak in the sky, low on the horizon. From the description, the Air Force intelligence people at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque and the Project Sign people at ATIC wrote the objects off as flares. After all, thousands of GIs had probably been discharged with a duffel bag full of liberated, very pistols and flares. But as days passed, the reports got better. They seemed to indicate that the flares were getting larger and more people were reporting seeing them. It was doubtful if this growth was psychological because there had been no publicity, so the Air Force decided to reconsider the flare answer. They were in the process of doing this on the night of the memorable night in the Green Fireball chapter of UFO history. At 9:27 p.m. on December 5th, an Air Force C-47 transport was flying at 18,000 feet, 10 miles east of Albuquerque. The pilot was a Captain Geode. Suddenly, the crew, Captain Geode, his co-pilot, and his engineer were startled by a green ball of fire flashing across the sky ahead of them. It looked something like a huge meteor, except that it was a bright green color and it didn't arch downward as meteors usually do. The green-colored ball of fire had started low from near the eastern slopes of the Sandia Mountains, arched upward a little, then seemed to level out. And it was too big for a meteor, at least it was larger than any meteor that anyone in the C-47 had ever seen before. After a hasty discussion, the crew decided that they'd better tell somebody about it, especially since they had seen an identical object 22 minutes before near Las Vegas, New Mexico. Captain Geode picked up his microphone and called the control tower at Kirtland Air Force Base and reported what he and his crew had seen. The tower relayed the message to the local intelligence people. A few minutes later, the captain of Pioneer Airlines Flight 63 called Kirtland Tower. At 9:35 p.m., he had also seen a green ball of fire just east of Las Vegas, New Mexico. He was on his way to Albuquerque and would make a full report when he landed. When he taxied his DC-3 up to the passenger ramp at Kirtland a few minutes later, several intelligence officers were waiting for him. He reported that at 9:35 p.m. he was on a westerly heading approaching Las Vegas from the east when he and his co-pilot saw what they first thought was a shooting star. It was ahead and a little above them. But, the captain said, it took them only a split second to realize that whatever they saw was too low and had too flat a trajectory to be a meteor. As they watched, the object seemed to approach their airplane head-on, changing color from orange-red to green. As it became bigger and bigger, the captain said, he thought sure it was going to collide with them, so he racked the DC-3 up in a tight turn. As the green ball of fire got abreast of them, it began to fall toward the ground, getting dimmer and dimmer until it disappeared. Just before he swerved the DC-3, the fireball was as big or bigger than a full moon. The intelligence officers asked a few more questions and went back to their office. More reports, which had been phoned in from all over northern New Mexico, were waiting for them. By morning, a full-fledged investigation was underway. No matter what these green fireballs were, the military was getting a little edgy. They might be common meteorites, psychologically enlarged flares, or true UFOs. But whatever they were playing around in one of the most sensitive security areas in the United States. Within 100 miles of Albuquerque were two installations that were the backbone of the atomic bomb program, Los Alamos and Sandia Base. Scattered throughout the countryside were other installations vital to the defense of the United States, radar stations, fighter interceptor bases, and the other mysterious areas that had been blocked off by high chain-link fences. Since the green fireballs bore some resemblance to meteors or meteorites, the Kirtland intelligence officers called in Dr. Lincoln La Paz. Dr. La Paz said that he would be glad to help, so the officers explained the strange series of events to him. True, he said, the description of the fireballs did sound as if they